This is my first video blog post. Well, I made one but deleted it, but this is my first video blog post, and it's going to be pretty short, but this is like kind of a note to myself and kind of a video blog post, but I want to be able to look back at this later. But I just had a really cool conversation with my host Chilean father guy, about music here in Chile, and we started out like just talking about music in general and how a lot of the music here has influence from, oddly enough, Mexican like ranchero music, especially the music of Chilean natives, like the ones that work in agriculture and in the mines and stuff like that. There's a music background there that's very based within that has a big influence from ranchero music in Mexico, and I guess that's because it has a lot. The only thing I could compare it to is like country music and how it has roots in like working hard and then laying back and having a beer or whatever. And apparently it's similar, and it's very similar to Mexican ranchero music, which is like their kind of country ranch music. And then we started talking about the current political atmosphere and things that would probably spawn musical movements, more like underground protesting kind of movements. And we got into a history of the president before President Allende, the first ever popularly elected socialist president, which was here in Chile in 1970, I think. There was a president before that, and there was a lot of issues in the pueblos, in the villages and things, with getting fair pay, getting a lot of social issues with that. And there was a underground movement. No, not an underground movement. There was music of protest here that was reflected in pop music protests, ranchero music that had protesting lyrics, a lot of things like that. But it was still like very like big and well known. And then Allende came around and wanted to impose a lot of socialist things that were supposed to better things, and it went from a decently central political atmosphere to a pretty left central pretty left political atmosphere. Yeah, and people were then upset because it was too left and it wasn't exactly what they wanted. It was almost too extreme. So there was a political movement and a musical movement with lyrics that reflected that they didn't want all these changes and things like that. And that was very protest related. But again, it was with the ranchero music, the native Chilean music, and the pop music of the time. But even at this point, a lot of American music's coming through too to Chile. That started in about the '60s with Elvis Presley and things like that. So yeah, but there's still not quite an underground music scene. And then 1973, the military coup, Pinochet took over, got violent, got crazy. There was curfews passed that like after 6 p.m. people couldn't be on the streets or they'd be killed. They couldn't gather in groups of 5 people or more because they'd be killed. Things like that. It was very tense, and it was really hard for if a band actively wrote protesting lyrics and then was put on the radio or something, they could be in trouble because obviously they're protesting against the government. So there was other ways of distributing music, like actually, weirdly enough, this is more towards the 80s, but cassettes became a big deal because it was a way of distributing the music that wasn't mainstream. But the first couple years of the dictatorship, there was like nothing. There was like no protest underground music at all because there was too much suppression. No one had any freedom to do anything. If you even like mentioned that you were gonna like do that, bad things would happen. You'd die, you'd disappear, things like that. And then maybe like a couple years into it, they started lessening the restrictions. The curfew moved to 7, then to 8, then to 9. And it was still terrible. It was still terrible. You couldn't speak out against the government or anything, but it got a little better. And with that little bit of freedom, a lot of young people started, and I'm sure a lot of young people were not so successful in this and probably disappeared or things like that. But a lot of young people started bands that were in opposition to the current political atmosphere. And that's where the underground movement of Chile kind of started, the underground music scene of Chile. Again, this is so I can look back at it later too, because I don't know. This might be my topic for my independent study project. I'm not really sure yet. And I'm going to post this to Kerry Voler's wall because I actually talked a lot about punk music in the United States, and he'd be proud. But so that's when that all started, and that's where it kind of gained movement. But now, and then we talked about the changes with technology today and how like the internet makes it so much easier to distribute your music without it being mainstream, and a lot of possibilities of other topics of movements. And then I asked about the student protests, and I was sure that there's got to be some underground movements right now in the music scenes in Chile that reflect the political environment going on right now, the protests in Santiago and here, and the marches and everything like that, and the schools that are being taken by students. And he said that he didn't know of any bands that has lyrics that reflect wanting to have cheaper and free education, and then there wasn't a lot of bands that reflected those attitudes yet. But then he also said he wasn't sure because it's a very, punk music now and underground music and alternative music is very niche now, where, if you don't know about it, that doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't exist. And I'm about to spend some time on the internet trying to find some. But he said he didn't know of any right now. But there's a lot of, there's still an underground music scene here that deals with political matters. And then there's obviously the traditional Chilean music, and then there's the traditional Chilean music that has protesting lyrics, and there's a lot of different things in between. And I have a feeling we're going to hear a lot of Chilean music coming up, because there's the Patria, which is basically their 4th of July, but we have 4th of July. They have a 6-day weekend, so lots of carretear, which is partying. It's not fiesta here, it's carretear. Well, there's actually 3 types. There's like a gathering of adults, kind of like a party, and there's a word for that I don't remember. And then there's fiesta, but fiestas are like with little kids. And then carretear is like a party. But yeah, it's like a 6-day long celebration. And there's a dance called the cueca, which I guess we're going to learn in class at some point. I'm not really sure, but I can ballroom dance a little, so I don't think it'll be too difficult. It's like a traditional dance of Chile. So I have a feeling we're going to hear a lot of Chilean music with that. And that'll help too. But that was just a really good talk I had. And then I talked to him about how I took a class on punk rock and history, and talked about how similarly in the 80s in America is when the the DIY punk music scene really came into existence against Reagan and the politics that were going on at the time. And also I mentioned how there's like a dispute about how did punk really start in America or in Britain. But it's clear that the DIY punk scene started in America, because the Sex Pistols and all them were very commercialized punk. They were an image. This is more DIY music, Minor Threat kind of stuff started here in opposition to Reagan in the 80s a lot. And there's still a very heavy punk music scene in America right now, which is why I was wondering if there was one here. So I guess I'll find out and try and dig deeper. But this is just an update for now, and I don't know what I'm doing yet tonight. It's only 7:15 here, and I guess I'll see what everyone else is up to. There's actually a Chinoy concert tonight. I went to try and buy tickets with some people a few days ago, and their place wasn't open, but I haven't really hung out with those people again, so if they're going, I might go, but I'm trying to see what everybody else is doing. Anyways, now I'm turning this more into just a video update and not so much about music, but yeah, today I had off. We went to Limache, which is, if you visualize it, there's one end of the metro called Puerto, which is in Valparaiso. It's where the big port is. And then the other side of the metro is another station called Limache, but it was at least an hour ride on the metro from here. So I'm guessing it's pretty far inland. And then it's actually a combo metro micro system where you can get off there, but you can continue going places via a bus, and it's like the same rate as it would be on the metro. So that was kind of cool. We walked around there, got to see some different sides of Chile, some a little bit poorer areas, and some cool graffiti. I saw one that said "fuck the police" and it was in English, which I thought was really funny. I saw a Batman graffiti thing, but unfortunately, Chase Timmons, I did not get a picture of it. I'm really sorry. If I go back there, I will. I promise, because it was really cool. It was just Batman logo. It wasn't that cool, but I think you'd think it was cool. And then we ate at a restaurant that used to be a fire station that all the proceeds go towards the firefighters and things like that, because here they're all volunteer, so they don't get paid to do it, so the money goes towards gas and things like that. So that was pretty cool. Food was all right. Yeah, I took a lot of cool pictures. They should all be on Facebook. The other day we went to Caleta Portales, which is like a fishing center, and talked to fishermen about the issues with industrial and commercialized fishing now, and how they're using nets that have a lot that don't have as big of holes, so they're catching fish at a younger age, and how they're not reproducing as much as they would, and how the fishermen's lives has been affected as a result of the changes in the types of fishing that there are. And there were some cool sea lions there. They called them sea wolves here. I don't remember the Spanish word for it, but it's a wolf, which is kind of cool. And a lot of pelicans and seagulls, and talked to a lot of different fishermen, and they're surprisingly nice and forgiving of our Spanish abilities, my Spanish abilities. But yeah, that was fun. Didn't have class today. Next week we go to Santiago for a day to see the Human Rights Museum about the dictatorship. So yeah, this was my first official video blog post thingy. Read my one I posted yesterday too, because that one's kind of cool. Yeah. Ciao.